All right. Well, hey, Groves, welcome to our final session, our final Grove meeting of the semester. We're excited to have spent the entire semester kind of talking about this whole thing of Acts and beyond Acts and what we're doing on Sunday mornings and seeing how does the gospel continue to move from Jerusalem to the ends of the earth through God's people today. This isn't just something that happened 2,000 years ago. It's still ongoing, and there's lots of work to get done. And even like we mentioned this past Sunday, the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. And so I think one of the reasons why, as we're going to talk about today, is we have Miguel and Angela, very familiar faces to everybody at Rising. But in case you have not been around and don't know, they literally just moved here last week and are going to be part of our Rising community here as they transition into kind of a new phase of your ministry, which you briefly talked about. So maybe you can just share briefly what you're doing now. You just got here, you're unpacked your bags. You have stuff all over the country that's going to be making its way to you eventually, and duffel bags sent home with other mission teams. So what is the next phase for you guys? And we'll kind of unpack how this relates to Rising.
Yeah, so then the next phase of our ministry is missionary care. So we're doing a trifold ministry. So it's training missionaries, it's caring for missionaries that have been on the field for a while now, and training churches on how to take care of missionaries. So training missionaries looks like for anywhere from how to fundraise, also figuring out, okay, is this for you, or is this just a gap year for you? It's how to preach, that you need to be prepared for everything, even if that's not your strong suit, that you need to be prepared. Care for missionaries is how to deal with burnout, doing mentoring, if you need counseling in a specific way to lead you in those kind of ways, and find places in ways that you can rest. In training churches is how to do shortened teams ethically, how to take care of missionaries, what questions to ask, to not be afraid of being maybe offensive when you ask certain questions to missionaries because you want to make sure your partners are in line with the gospel. So all those things.
Yeah.
So it's an exciting transition. This is what you guys have been praying about for the last couple of years, feeling God leading you and calling you in this new direction. And it's kind of ironic because this is almost everything we've been talking about, even on Sunday morning. Even we just had our message about the church and the kind of the, I don't say the riff, but the rub of the Hebraic Jews and the Grecian Jews over how to take care of the widows. And, this idea that we took from Moses and Jethro, his father-in-law, say, hey, there's too much. You're trying to do too much. You need some help. If you keep doing this at the rate you're doing it, you're going to burn out. And kind of the same thing with the early church apostles. Like, all this can't fall on their shoulders. They need a support system around them that's going to keep them going. And so I want to zero in on one of the specific things, the last two things you talked about, which is how do we support our missionaries in the field, and how do we as churches figure out how to better do that. So that's kind of what we want to kind of wrap up this whole series with is we have partners in ministry at Rising, and some of those are around the world, and some of those are even right here locally. And so how do we come around from your guys' experience, from your expertise in that sense, like give us some tips, like how do we support not just globally but locally the people that are in ministry on the front lines, carrying the load that God's called them to do. What would you say?
I think one of the biggest things is just checking in with people, like being intentional to really ask the question, how are you really? Not just like, hey, how's it going? Like, okay, cool, nice, see you later. But like really checking in with people to say, like, how are you really doing? Like, let's have an intentional conversation here. Because doing ministry is often a very lonely road. You often feel like you don't fit in a lot of places. Like for me personally, like I never fully fit in Guatemala, and I never fully fit in here in the States. And so I walk in this very like limbo area of like neither place is technically home for me because I don't fit in anywhere. And so really just having those conversations with people of like, hey, let's just check in. Like, let's just have a conversation. And it doesn't cost any money. Literally all it costs is your time to have a conversation with somebody, to invest in them, to care for them, to remind them that they're not alone, to encourage them, to pray with them. Like all of those things are absolutely huge. When you feel so far removed from everybody else, you feel oftentimes forgotten because you're doing this thing and you feel isolated and you're like, cool, I'm just out here and everybody else is living their lives and that's great. You kind of feel like you're watching in a way from like the outside. Like, we'll see pictures of like what's happening. We're like, oh, that's so cool. I wish I could be there. And you often feel like, but nobody remembers that like I'm over here, but I'm part of the team too. Like I'm part of this body of Christ. And so I really do believe that encouragement and reaching out to people and really actually caring about them for who they are as people is such an important step. And encouraging the missionary to continue to walk on in their journey, whether they're locally, whether they're internationally. Like it makes a big difference.
So I don't want to play devil's advocate, but I feel like sometimes it might feel like we're bugging you know what I mean? Like, hey, we're like contacting them and then they feel obligated to reach back and they're busy. They got all kinds of stuff. They don't need one more person that's trying to, draw from. Is that false?
False. Yeah. When you walk in relationship with somebody, like that absolutely makes a difference. Like if we never, for instance, like we never heard from the church ever. And then all of a sudden it's like, hey, how are you doing? It's like, okay, wait, why are you checking in on me? But if we have relationship and we work to build that relationship, then it's like, oh my gosh, my family's asking how I'm doing. This is so exciting. Like we've always loved when people have sent us messages like, hey, just want to check in, see how you guys are doing. Or I heard a storm is heading that way. Like, are you guys safe? What's going on? Like, absolutely. I'm like, oh my gosh, they care. Like, how sweet is that? Like, you just feel so encouraged and so loved. So absolutely false. Like people love being cared about for sure.
We've actually talked about that as much as financial gifts are needed, and you guys should do that, it means way more to us when someone says, hey, I would like to go visit you, or I was thinking about you, I was listening to the sermon and you came to mind. Like I honestly, to my heart, that means way more than when we see a random donation come through. It helps, but knowing that we're known and that people think about us even from far away makes all this way less lonely.
So in that sense, what is the best way? I mean, because you are busy, and so like you can't just get on the phone all the time, and you also don't want to be where like, hey, I'm contacting you because I actually need something.
Exactly.
So in that sense, what does that look like? You're talking like text, letters, emails.
Yeah.
I mean, like what?
I mean, I feel like when you know your missionary, you also know the best form of communication with them. And so for us, it's often been through like email or messenger has been like the easiest. But I would also say like if somebody messaged me and said, hey, I'd love to set up a call with you when you have some time. I just want to see how you're doing and like check in. Let me know when you have some space. Like I would feel so honored about that. And then it puts it in my court to say like, yeah, like we have space at this time. So it doesn't feel like it interrupts the day. We can do it at a time where we have actual like time to sit down and enjoy time with a person. But again, it's when you walk in relationship with these people, when you walk in relationship with missionaries, it makes all the difference in the world. It doesn't feel annoying. It doesn't feel like an interruption of the day. Like, in fact, when we've gotten emails come through, even if we're out at ministry, I see the name, I'm like, oh my gosh, I want to see what they said. And it's like, wow, this is so encouraging. Like, I feel uplifted. I feel cared for. And I'm like, look who messaged us. And it really is just an exciting part of our day for sure.
It makes us perform less too. Like, it makes us feel like we don't have to show it like, oh yeah, look at me, all the ministry that I'm doing. It's like, I'm just a person to you. That's awesome.
Yeah. So I feel like there's two different angles on this. There's the foreign, in other countries where they are kind of alone, but there's also people that are serving like here and are actually part of Rising Church. I'm thinking like Katie Hope, and she does, like she's doing all of her kids at the block. So she's kind of a missionary locally. And so she may still feel those same feelings, but how do you do it locally where it's like you see the person on Sunday morning, but then is it awkward to like, hey, I was thinking about you this week? I mean, what is your perspective on people that are serving like Rising, around here, but are still kind of doing similar things?
I think those are the ones that actually sometimes need it the most, because we're so far removed that the wrong misconception, is to think that we're the heroes because we're far away, and the ones who are locals actually get less attention. And it's way harder to fundraise when you're local. It's way harder to get the point come across. Because people are like, oh yeah, it's just here. Like you just drove 10 minutes. You didn't fly to Africa or something like that. So I would say, yeah, it's extremely important for them to feel reached, to feel loved, to feel cared for. Even if you're not serving alongside of them, even if you're not donating, but you're reaching out to them so they don't feel alone and they feel seen. I think it's the same thing. With Katie, it's like, okay, does she love going for coffee? Does she love getting a breakfast at a specific place? It's like all those things. It really doesn't take a lot of intentionality to make them feel seen.
And I think like words of encouragement go a long way. Hey, I was praying for you this morning, and I feel like the Lord laid this on my heart to share with you. You're doing an incredible job. Like, who doesn't want to hear you're doing an incredible job? Like, what a blessing that is to be able to receive those messages. because somebody was intentional to pray for you this morning.
So intentionality is pretty key.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like you guys are about to make that transition because I feel like you guys have been very good when you're in town, you know, every 4, 5, 6 months. You know what I mean? Like you see a bunch of people, like we always go and have a meal. Yeah. And so, but if you're living here, then I feel like it's going to be easier for us to not be intentional because it's just like, oh,
Yeah.
Exactly.
hey, good to see you. We just saw you last week or saw you at Grove or saw you whatever. And then it kind of shifts. And so I feel like that's where I feel like we really have to be intentional because even the people that, like even with you guys, once you've been here for 4 months or 5 months, it's not going to be like, oh, we gotta go out with these guys and hang out because they're going to go home. They're going to go back to Guatemala. Then we're not going to see them.
Yeah.
We're going to see them next week. But then almost like you're saying, it can almost be more neglectful.
Yeah.
With people that are close.
Yeah, it's actually something that we've talked about. Like, we need to find more topics of conversation now. Because we're like, I cannot just be talking about ministry all the time. Like, sure, the first few times that's awesome, but then the third time is like, you can talk about anything else.
What are we going to talk about?
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's talk about the other thing. So churches, you know, part of the thing you want to do is go into churches and help them know how to do this better.
Yeah.
So I'm excited because you guys are here, and so we're kind of going to be hopefully your test case in that sense. Like you guys can help Rising, much less all these other churches, but this church. So like, what would you say? Probably from your experience, what would you tell churches? Like, here's what you need to be doing better when it comes to partnering with your mission partners.
Well, let's see how much time we got. But I think it's from the get-go, like the simple things, like the church application. That's extremely intimidating for any missionary. Because we're like, okay, how much of this is, do I sound like a real person? Does this sound like I'm performing? Does this sound like this is not who they met? What can I say for them to donate? But also, do I want them as partners? I for sure want them as partners. So it's all of these conversations that, I mean, we've talked about it with our friends who are missionaries in Guatemala. Like every time we all have like church applications, we're like, how was yours? So how many questions was yours? Mine was 20. Mine was 35. So it's all those things, like how to make it friendly, understandable, not accusatory, if that makes sense, or like an interrogation. It's also, okay, your mission partners, do you know them all? Are you visiting them all like in equal ways? So are you being intentional in equal ways? What was the other one that we were talking about?
Are you reaching out to your partners? Like, are you building relationship with them? Like, there's a number of things that you can do beyond just donating to get to know your partners. It's also really putting out there from the beginning what the expectations are. Like, there's a lot of times on the missionary side that we're like, we don't want to just shove information down your throat because we don't know if you want it. But at the same time, we want to share with you what's going on. We've been to churches before where people in the church didn't even know that we were at their church, like we were sponsored by their church, that we're mission partners at all. They're like, wait, who are you guys? We're like, okay, great. So how do you inform the congregation of who your mission partners are? What kind of information do you need from your mission partners? And being able to state all that kind of stuff up front. So that as, you know, as missionaries, as we're applying, maybe we're saying a video each month is far too much for us to handle. This might not be the best relationship for us to be in. And that's an okay thing. But if you're able to state those things up front, it helps all the parties to be able to understand, like, this is what the church is asking. This is what the missionary is asking, what each party needs and things like that. And so we really just want to be able to bring clarity and like really bridge that gap between the two, that it's like communication is obviously the most important thing there and intentionality on both sides. But both sides really lack the understanding of what needs to happen there. And so just bridged.
Even the congregation, like to go to the website, go to like find out what missionaries are being sponsored by the church, that you don't have to wait for a sermon or for the missions week to happen or the mission series. Like go inform yourself of where are your offerings and tithings, tithes going, tithings? Yeah, English, sorry. But yeah, all those things, so you know how to pray for them. You don't have to wait for your pastor to mention it.
Well, as we kind of get to the end, I don't know if everybody knows, I mean, kind of your guys' story on how you ended up at Rising, because you weren't set from Rising, so you're kind of, and I think it's kind of a cool story, like when you just talked about that very first visit, how you came from another church, you know what I mean, and kind of how it's different here at Rising versus some of the other churches that are partnered with you, but why you ended up deciding to come to Rising, even though you didn't come out of Rising. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it was through Bill, actually.
Santa.
Yeah, so all of our experiences with churches, real quick, haven't been great because it's usually very high maintenance. They want a lot of pictures. You feel like marketing, honestly. Like, oh, the church looks better if they're going to the nations. So honestly, we were very skeptical when we got a random phone call from Bill being like, hey, I need to talk to you right now. I was like, okay, what happened? And we talked for like 10 minutes. And I was like, so what was it? And he said, hey, I need you guys on a call tomorrow. We were like, okay. And honestly, we were like, sure, we'll join your phone call. It's fine. And we were not expecting much from it. And I feel like our phone call was with real questions from real people. And when we came, we actually went to another church where the pastor had met us before. We actually had Thanksgiving with that pastor. And then when we met each other, I was like, hey, how's it going? He was like, it's like, I sat next to you for like hours. And he was like, so Nicaragua? I was like, Guatemala. Ah, yeah. Okay. And that was a very, honestly, sad trip. So when we came to Georgia, we were like, sure, we'll go to church and we'll listen to the sermon and we'll shake a few hands. And then our first experience was Phyllis saying, hey.
I thought it was Phyllis.
Yeah, it was Phyllis.
We're like, who are you?
Yeah, but it was especially like, you're Miguel and Angela. You're the Svila, you're partners. So I was like, I don't know you, lady. And it was Phyllis and then other people. And then we went inside, actually, when we went to the coffee shop area and we saw our name, we both got teary and we were like, we cannot cry right now because we never had the experience of feeling known like that. And then we went on stage and the whole experience that first week coming here felt very welcoming. And that's not when God spoke to us about moving here, but that definitely planted a big seed to us like, oh, this is what having a home church feels like. That's awesome. And it was cool because on the other side, we went back to Guatemala to tell our friends who are missionaries too. I was like, this is awesome. We should all pray for this more. Because we know very few missionaries who actually have a home church in the States, sadly. So coming here, it felt very similar to having Josefina, our community leader in Guatemala, when we were doing ministry in Guatemala. It was an easy yes to work with her because it was through a relationship. So coming to Rising, it was also extremely easy because, not for nothing, you guys are extremely humble. So we never came here and you guys told us how to fix our ministry. It was always, what can we do better? How can we love you guys well from you and Kimberly, Bill, Phyllis, Brian Buckwalter. Everyone here has always asked, how can we do better? And that to us meant the world. Just all the humility and all the just feeling welcome and like, hey, we want you to be a part. You're not a guest. And I think we've always felt that way.
Yeah. And I feel like it was like the missing puzzle piece that we needed to step into this new season of ministry. Because I really do feel like doing it from Guatemala, it could have happened, but it's such a comfortable place for us. I feel like that the Lord really wanted to uproot from being comfortable to move into a place that it's uncomfortable, but there's community. So it makes it easier, if that makes sense. That it's like you're uncomfortable in a situation of like, man, there's a lot of new things happening. This is all a bit crazy, but we have people around us that love us and care for us, and we know we're not alone in it. And so in that sense, it does make it a lot easier as well.
Right. Well, I mean, I think on behalf of everyone, I'm pretty sure everyone's pretty excited you guys are here. It is kind of like, well, now we have to redefine the relationship a little bit because how do we do regular life now with you as opposed to every 6 months or whatever else, or just coming to Rising weekend, like, you might be on whatever retreat we're on. So be patient with us as everybody here figures it out. We're excited to have you guys here and partnering with you and hopefully figuring out how we can better partner with missionaries, not just us, but kind of this movement. I would hope that would kind of move out of what you guys are starting, that would help the church do this better. Do it better than what we've been doing, so that people have longevity and they can fulfill God's calling in their hearts and lives. So when you guys see these guys, make sure you thank them for all their hard work and support them. And let's figure out, and what we talk about in your groups, what are some things that we can do? What are some practical steps that we can take to better support people in ministry, whether out distant countries or whether right here in Gwinnett County? I think it's important for us to be those encouragers and be those support systems for others. So hopefully you've had a great semester. We won't check back in with you next week, but next semester. So thanks for joining, and we'll see you soon.